first look at Microsoft Excel 210. Starting the Excel 210 program. To start Microsoft Excel 210, click on the Start button, move the mouse pointer to where it says All Programs. If necessary, scroll down so you can see the Microsoft Office item here. Click on that, and within that, go and click on the Microsoft Excel 210 item here. If you click on that, the program starts. What is the active cell? The active cell is basically the cell that you click on so that you can enter data or manipulate the contents of the cell. So for instance here I've clicked on this cell here and it has a reference which is D4 and the number is in here. If I click randomly someplace else, if I click here, you'll notice this is H10, so it's this column here, which is the H column, and it's row 10. Click somewhere else, maybe here, and this is A3, so that's column A, row 3, and it's the intersection of the row and the column, and that is the active cell. The active cell is, if you click on it and type in some information, so if I click in my name and press return, you'll notice the name went into the active cell there. So that's basically the active cell. Entering text and numbers, and also examining the default alignment for text and numbers. If I type here, so the active cell is D5, and I'll type in the word region, and I'll press return, and when you press return, you'll notice you move down to the next cell, and I'll type in the word north, and press return, south, and press return, east, and press return, and west, and press return. If I now click over here, so the active cell here is E5, you can see that over here, so it's in column E, row 5. I'll type in the word sales, and then at random I'll just type in a few sales. So here I am, I've typed in some basic information, and if you look more carefully you'll notice that if we click here, just to illustrate the point, this cell here, the active cell D5, it contains text, and as you can see the text is aligned to the left, whereas this cell, this cell, this cell and this cell contain numbers, and as you can see numbers are aligned to the right. If you think about it, this makes sense, because normally when you start writing you write from left to right, whereas numbers are normally aligned to a decimal point, so it makes sense that numbers are aligned to the right. And as you can see, we didn't have to format this anyway. Excel did this by default for us. Summing a column of numbers. Here we have some basic information we've already typed in, and here we have basically the sales regions, and we have sales values for these different regions. If I click here, so the active cell becomes E10, I want to basically total up or to sum all of these values here. Now you could do this using a calculator, but the trouble is, let's say that that figure was changed, maybe it was inaccurate or updated, so we wanted to change it to something else. Then if we're using a calculator, we'd have to redo the calculations all over again. Now one of the nice things about Excel is it does an awful lot of things which are basically time consuming. If you did them manually, it does them automatically. So if you quickly want to just sum up those values, we're on the Home tab here, which is the default tab, and if you look right over here, there's this button here called Auto Sum. If I click on Auto Sum, don't worry too much at the moment about all the bits and pieces in here, but basically it's putting some code in there automatically, and all I did was I typed up on this button here, and it's basically saying the calculation here says equal the sum of all the values between cell E6, which is that one there, and E9, which is that one there. So literally all I have to do is press the return button and it's updated them. So let me just click on that and delete it so I can see that again. So I'll click on the active cell where you want the results to appear. I click on Auto Sum, press return, and there you are. Now the great thing is let's say those were inaccurate figures in the first item, in the first cell there. I'll change those. And when I press the return button, keep your eye on the numbers at the bottom. So I'm going to press the return key now. You see what happens, it's changed. Just to illustrate the point, let me put a whole load of zeros in there. And as you can see, it changes. And that really represents the true value of using Excel, the fact that it automates things. It takes the tedium out of doing calculations, so you don't have to keep recalculating. Back in the day, if you were doing this by simply writing things down and using a calculator, every time you changed a number, you'd have to recalculate it. As you've seen, it's done that automatically. And all we had to do is click on this little button here, this auto sum button. So we'll see this in far more detail later when we start looking at functions, but this just illustrates, introduces the power of Excel and kind of introduces you to some of the power that's available there, and it's very, very easy to use. Entering a date into Excel. If we just bring up a worksheet here, if I type in a date, so I'll say 02/02/2010, and I'll press return. Not much seems to have happened there. It's more or less as we typed it in, except the leading 0 has been removed, if you notice, because I typed in 02/02/210. But the nice thing is, if I right click on this, and we'll see this in more detail later, but we're just to introduce you to the concepts here. If I right click on that, from the pop-up menu I can click on where it says Format Cells, and you'll notice that there's various categories it could have used. It could have used general, number, currency and counting, etc. And automatically it's picked up the fact that was a date. And as we'll see, this is quite important, because when it comes to doing things like sorting, if you want to sort by date, it needs to know it's a date format, which is rather different from, say, just a numeric code or what have you. And because it knows it's a date, if I want to, I could just click on this, and as a click of a button, there you are, it's changed the formatting completely. So again, that's just introducing the idea that an awful lot goes on behind the scenes in Excel to make your life easy, and it's done automatically. Now, worksheets and workbooks. What I've done here is I've opened up a default workbook. And a workbook is a bit like a pad in some ways. It's a bit like a notepad, and it's got 3 pages in it. Can you see down the bottom here, you've got sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. If I go back to sheet 1, I can just type in a whole load of ones and press return. In sheet 1 here, I'll just type in my name. I'll click on sheet 2, and I'll type in the word Cheltenham. And on sheet 3, I'll type in the number 3. Now, this basically just so we can identify that these are different sheets when we click down here. So you can see we are going from different sheet to different sheet. And as you can see, this workbook contains 3 sheets. As I say, it's a bit like a physical notepad containing 3 pages, if you like. And to move from worksheet to worksheet within the workbook, it couldn't be simply just click down here. So in a more real world example, we could have maybe figures here for relating to, say, this year. This sheet here could contain figures to, say, last year, and this sheet here could have figures for the year before that. So basically, it's a way of dividing up your data and having different information on different sheets. You'll notice by default there are 3 worksheets per workbook. You can change that so that if you need more, for instance, let's say you needed 12, let's say you were going to have these sheets representing, say, months of the year, you could easily set up the defaults. You could change the defaults to give you 12 worksheets when you created a new workbook rather than 3, but the default is 3. And as you've seen, it couldn't be easier. You just click between those to move from one to the other. So that's basically worksheets and workbooks. Saving a workbook. Right, here I've created a brand new workbook. I clicked on the Start button and opened up a new copy of Excel. And I'll just type in my name, just so there's some data in there. Now in order to save this, I just simply click on the Save button up here, and this comes up with this Save As dialog box, and from here I can choose the destination folder. By default it'll probably go to My Documents. If you want, you can have it going someplace else, and basically you just give it a name. So I'll call it Dave 01. You can call it anything you want, obviously, and you'll notice by default it saves as an Excel workbook, and it uses the file extension XLSX, which is the 2010 file format. You'll notice incidentally, if I click on this, we could use other formats. For instance, you could save it as an XL95-2003 file format, which would make the file format compatible with previous versions. But as you can see, by default it uses the new Microsoft Excel 210 format here. So as I say, basically you decide where you're going to save it, which folder you're going to save to, you give it a name, change the format if necessary, then click on Save, and that's as simple as that. Once it's been saved, you'll notice up the top here the file name appears. In this case it's Dave-01, and you've got the file extension, and of course it tells you it's a Microsoft Excel document. So that's basically how you save documents. It's as simple as that. Closing a workbook and exiting the Excel program. Here I've got just a workbook. I can change the data in it if I want to. I can change that to David Murray. Or we can put any other data in there that we wanted. When it comes to saving that, you simply click on the Save button here. Now, in order to close the actual workbook down, if I go to File, Close, that's closed down the workbook within Excel. It hasn't closed down Excel, it's closed down the workbook within Excel. If I click over here, that will close down the Excel program itself. So if we just quickly go through that again, in order to, I'll just make a slight change there. Right, in order to save the document, you click on Save. In order to close this particular workbook, you go to File, Close, and that closes the workbook. At that point, the workbook has gone, so at this point it's almost like having a pad, if you like, with no pages in. So we've got the Excel program, but there's no actual workbooks opened within it. And in order to close the Excel program down, you'd click here. If we just quickly go back there for a minute, you'll notice that if you make some changes, I made some changes there. If I click on the Close button up here, it'll say, do you want to save your changes? Yes, no. And I'll say in this case, no, don't save them. Click on there. And it didn't save the changes, and it closed the workbook down in one go. So you notice when you try exiting the Excel program, if you've got any unsaved work, it will ask you, do you want to save this, yes or no? So always pay careful attention to any dialog boxes that pop up. Creating a new workbook. Here we've got the Excel program, it's running. We've already opened a workbook called Blank. If I want to open a new workbook, I can simply go to where it says File, New. We can pick a template, more on that later. And if I just simply click on Create and use the defaults here, that will create a new workbook. Notice it's now called Book 1, which is the default name. So I could type in some data here. Just type in a few numbers. If I want to save that, I can click here to save that. It's saved. So I've now got two workbooks up and running. If I want to, I can use a keyboard shortcut to create a new workbook. If I press Control N, notice it now says Workbook 2 or Book 2, because we've now got three open workbooks. The original one we started off with, the second one that I created by going File, New and clicking on there, and the third one I created by pressing Control N, which is the keyboard shortcut to create a new workbook. So if I click here, that will close them down one at a time. We're back to where we started. Opening a workbook. Here we already have a workbook that's been opened on the screen. If I want to open a new workbook, I simply go File, Open, select the particular file that I want, so I'll select this one here, click on Open or double click on that, same thing, and up comes the new workbook. So again, to open another workbook, File, Open, select the one you want, click on Open, and away you go. Incidentally, the shortcut key to display the open dialog box is Control O. So if I press Control O, the open dialog box is displayed, and from there you can pick the particular file that you want to open. You just either select it and double click, or select it and click on the Open button, same thing. Switching between workbooks. Don't confuse this with switching between worksheets, because if you remember, by default each workbook has 3 sheets within it, 3 worksheets within it. If I bring up a workbook here, and if I open some other workbooks, so for instance, if I go File, Open, and I'll open Book 1, if I go File, Open, and I'll go to this file called Dave01, we've now got 3 different workbooks open. Remember, each book has worksheets within it, but what we've got here are almost like 3 separate pads, if you like, all containing sheets. So in this case, we've got the 3 sheets that are open. Now, in order to change from workbook to workbook, if I click on where it says View, and then go to Switch Windows, I can click, for instance, on, say, this one here, and that switches to that one. I can click on, say, this one here, Book 1, switches to that one. Or I can go to the Dave workbook, like so. So there are many different ways of switching between open workbooks, but this is probably an easy way as any. So the way we did that, we clicked on the View tab, went to Switch Windows, and from there you click on the actual workbook you want to switch to. These must all be open, of course, so what we're doing is we're talking about switching between open workbooks. This is different, obviously, to the workbooks that have been saved on your hard disk. That's how we do it. Saving a workbook using a different name. In this case, I've opened a workbook. It's called Sales 2005. If I want to save this as a different name, all I go is I click on the File tab here, I go Save As, and I just simply type in a different name. So I can change that to Sales 2005 Updated. I can call it anything I want. And if I click on the Save button, when I do that, keep your eye on the top here, I'll click on Save Now, and as you can see, it's now saved that as a new file name. So it's as easy as that to take an existing file, then you click on File, Save As, and then you just save it as a different file name. Of course, you can also change the format and you can also change the location, but that's basically how you change the file name. Saving a workbook using a different file type. In this particular case, we've got a workbook. As you can see, it's called Sales 2005, and the format is an XLSX. It's the format used by default by Excel 2010. If I want to save this as a different file format, I click on File, Save As, and from here I click on where it says Save As Type. I click on the down arrow here, and as you can see, there's a whole range of different formats I could use. For instance, I could click here to save as a PDF document, an Adobe Acrobat document. I could use a CSV format, comma separated value format. I could save it as straightforward delimited text. I could save it as a workbook that's compatible with earlier versions of Excel. So if I clicked on this version here, as you can see, it's going to save it as an Excel 97-2003 workbook. What that means is, and you can notice it's got a different extension here, it's got XLS extension. What that means is that it's going to save it in a file format that's compatible with earlier versions of Excel. So if different people in the office, or maybe different offices of your group, are using earlier versions of Excel, if you saved it in this format and then sent it to them by email or via disk or just over the network, then basically if they have earlier versions, they'll still be able to read it. Click on Save, and there you are, it's now been saved, and as you can see the file name here is now XLS. The original file is still there, of course, with a different extension, but I've now saved it as an Excel file using the earlier Excel file formats. Right, getting help within Excel 210. If you look at the ribbon at the top here, over here you'll notice there's a question mark, and that's the Microsoft Excel help. Notice also that it displays the keyboard shortcut, which is F1. So if I just click outside that for a minute, if I press F1, look what happens. It brings up the Excel help. Always remember this keyboard shortcut, it works in just about all Microsoft programs. So all I did, if I just do that again, all I did was I pressed the F1 key and that brings up help. And that is equivalent to clicking on here, but it's just easier. So it's a very good keyboard shortcut to remember that, the F1 key, the help key. Now you notice if we look at the help here in more detail, there's information about getting started with Excel 210. If I go and click on that, basically you've got information about installing Excel, and you've got information about worksheets. If you clicked on that, for instance, you can add all sorts of information here, or you can access the information here. So if we go back here, remember this is the back button, we can go back to where we were at any point. If you want, you can browse information about particular items, so charts or macros or worksheets or functions or what have you. You can see how to create your first workbook here. You can search for help here. Basically you should spend a bit of time examining what's available here, because there's an awful lot of help available. You'll notice that if you display some information, so for instance let's say you've browsed here to get information about charts, maybe you want to know about creating a chart, maybe you want to know about available chart types. So there's the information here, and we can broaden this out. If you want to print this for a permanent record, you can print it there. And if you go along here, there's various other things you can do. For instance, you can show a table of contents. If you click on the table of contents, that basically gives you a detailed table of contents, which you can expand or collapse. If you look at charts, that's currently expanded. If I click on that, it collapses it. If you go to something else like file management, if I click on where it says file management, you can see that expands it. Click on it again, and that closes it down. So if you want to know about file management, if you click on that, let's say you want to know how to, what should we look at? Repair a corrupted workbook. If we click on that, up comes information about how you repair a corrupted workbook. So as you can see, there is masses and masses of help available here. So if you get stuck, basically go into the help there and try looking at the table of contents, actually table of contents. Or the other thing you can do is search. So for instance, let's say you want to find information about printing. You just simply type in the word printing, press the return key, and here you are, there's an awful lot of information about printing. So let's say you want to know about settings, for instance, the print error on a worksheet. You would click there, and there's the information. So as I say, it's worth spending quite a bit of time just getting familiar with this. Let's say you want to know about formulas, for instance. You click on formulas, and there's all the information you're ever going to need. Functions, there's a whole function reference in here. So if you go down there, if you want to know what these various things do, so let's say you want to look at the functions available within Excel listed alphabetically, you click there, and here they are, a whole load of different functions. Probably the majority of these you've never heard of, you're never going to use, but the point is if you need to learn about these functions, then there's the information for you. So it's kind of the more you look, the more you see, basically. So I say do get used to using this help thing. So you've got the back button there, so I can go back, and then I can go forward again. You can stop there, you can refresh, you can go back to the home page there. You can print, you can change the font size, so make it a bit bigger if you want to, if it's harder to see. You can look at the table of contents or hide them, and if you click here it means it stays on top. So if you're looking at the help here and it's telling you how to do something, you can have this displayed on top permanently while you're actually entering data or manipulating data. So as I say, it's a very powerful help system there. Basically use it. You'll notice if we click here, there's a see all. So basically, as I say, there's lots more information than you might first realize. Let's say you want to know about security and privacy. Click on that. And there you are. Let's say you want to know what trusted document is. Click on that, tell you all about it. Let's say you want to know how to create a trusted document. Don't worry about what it is at the moment. It's not important. We're just using the help here. So how would you create a trusted document? Click there and it tells you everything step by step by step. So the help is there. Use it.